What's up, guys? Welcome back to episode 7 of my poker vlog. This session is from when I played on the live stream at the Lodge Card Club just outside Austin, Texas, about a month ago at this point. For those that didn't watch the stream live, I won't spoil any results, but I will say that regardless of outcome, I will definitely be back at the Lodge the next time I'm in Texas. It's objectively one of the best poker rooms I've ever played in. I had a ton of fun, and I can't say enough about how well they run things over there. Anyway, the stream was officially played at 5-5-10 with a 2K initial buy-in and match the stack thereafter. But remember, this is Texas, so that 5-5-10 becomes 5-5-10-25 or 50 or even 100 real quick. So basically there was no shortage of action. As always, if you do like the content and you want to see me outclassed at the table on a more regular basis, don't forget to smash that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And now, without further delay, let's get to the video. First off, if you want to watch me punt off stacks in real time, I'm going to be playing on the Lodge live stream. That game is going to be 5-5-10 with a bunch of straddles and stand-up game mixed in, so super pumped for that. It'll be my first time playing here in Texas, and something about things tending to be larger in this state, I don't know. What's up, guys? Just landed in Austin about an hour ago. It's Friday night, so Sunday and Monday gonna head over to the Lodge to play some poker. Monday is the live stream game, so hopefully you guys will tune in for that. Super pumped. But until then, we're just gonna see what Austin has in store for us. So yeah, I will talk to you guys later.
We arrive at the Lodge a little before 2 p.m. with some time to kill. We get on the wait list for a 1-3 seat, looking to warm up a bit, but unfortunately we aren't quite able to get to the top of that list before we get called over to the stream table to mic up and get the action rolling. We're still waiting for a couple more players to show up and fill up the table, so this hand is 5-handed, which is going to widen our range a little bit. I'll also note that the Lodge doesn't take a rake, which not only is cool, but it's also going to have an additional small effect on the type of hands we might want to take a flop with. The very first hand, we look down at the 5 deuce of clubs in the third blind. Boston Timmy opens up the action on the button with a raise to 25 with ace-jack offsuit, certainly standard, and when it folds to us with the 5-5-10 structure, we're getting a very good price to defend. So we put in the call and go heads up to a flop of Jack-Jack 3, which is just the first installment of a series called My Opponent Having the Nuts, which might as well have been the title of this stream. Anyway, we don't have much at all on this board, and we're out of position, so we check it over to Timmy, and he decides to put out a bet of 15. With just 5 high, I think this is a hand we can definitely look to let go, but it's also a pretty small bet of about 1/3 pot, and it's one that we expect Timmy might make with his entire range here, knowing that he's a lot more likely to have hands like strong overcards or small pairs that we won't have out of the third blind. Basically, even though Timmy does have a monster, he's not going to all that often, so we decide to float the flop here and take a turn, which is the 4 of diamonds, giving us an open-ended straight draw. This is one of the best cards in the deck for us outside of a 5, but once again, we check it over to the aggressor, and now Timmy puts in a bet of 35. This bet is just about 1/3 pot again, which is very small for a turn bet. It doesn't seem to represent a whole lot of strength. On top of that, I think we can credibly represent a jack here, as hands like Queen Jack, Jack 10, etc. are all hands we would definitely defend out of the third blind and sometimes trap on the flop. And lastly, we are of course open-ended, so we almost always have outs to make the winner. Because of this, we want to put Timmy to the test. We put in the raise to 85 to set up a potential move on a favorable river and force Timmy to fold hands like ace-king or ace-queen.
Little raise here from Zaction.
Timmy does make the call because, duh, he has a jack, and the river is the king of hearts, no help to us. Out of position, we're in a bit of a bind. We shut it down with a check because I don't see a whole lot of bluffs getting through. Timmy decides to bet 125, about half pot, but he could have bet $10 and there still wouldn't be much we could do. We lay it down. We're not off to the best start, but it just so happened our opponent had a very strong holding, which I'm sure won't happen for the whole session. We go about another 10 minutes, during which Joyce shows up in the 5 seat, so we're now 6-handed, and Gage opens it up on the button with 10-5 of hearts, which I think is fine. Eric gets out of the way, and we're in the big blind looking down at the Texas Special.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Zaction with the pocket kings.
We've got Mark to our right in the third blind, We know that Mark is a pretty aggressive player, so we decided to just call and hope Mark gets a little frisky with the squeeze, which he actually does have a reasonable hand for with a weak ace, but he elects to take a flop instead, so we go 3 ways to a flop.
And an ace right there in the window.
For Mark.
And unfortunately, our Cowboys are less like the 2022 Cowboys and more like the Cowboys of the past few seasons, constantly underachieving as we're outflopped on a deuce jack ace rainbow board, which is pretty much just a disaster for us. There's really no reason to bet here given the ace on board, so we check.
Some interesting hands early as Mark bets 50.
And Mark puts out a bet of 50, about half pot.
What's Zaction going to do here with the Cowboys?
Obviously, we don't love to see Mark betting such a dry board. He can definitely have an ace, but I also think he might reasonably do this in position with a straight draw like Queen 10 or 3-4. So we elect to peel one off.
Hard to fold those.
And the turn is the 8 of diamonds, which shouldn't change much.
As it gets a little bit more expensive, though, it will be easier to get away here.
We check again, and Mark checks behind, which I'm actually not a huge fan of in his position, but I think it's fine. And the river is the 6 of spades. We check a third time. Again, I think it would be okay to go for some value with Mark's hand, but he takes the conservative line and turns over his cards to secure the pot, knocking us back to 0 for 2.
And the Cowboys go down in flames.
A couple orbits go by before this hand when we're straddling the 25 under the gun, which was the standard for most of the stream. Boston Timmy limps in with 5-4 offsuit in the small blind, which I'm not a huge fan of at all. Gage gets out of the way, and Eric puts in the raise to 75 from the third blind.
Eric with the Cowboys.
We look down at ace-jack suited in the straddle, not only the second best hand we've seen so far, but is also likely to be ahead of a lot of the hands Eric might look to isolate with out of the third blind when Tim limps in. We decide to 3-bet to 200, which is perhaps a bit small, but we are in position, so we're okay giving him a slightly better price.
Zaction here goes for a 3-bet to 200.
Tim decides to let his hand go about 45 seconds too late, and the action is back on Eric, who elects not to 4-bet, which, seeing his hand, I'm a little surprised by given we're not all that deep, playing about 70 blinds effective with the straddle. Anyway, the flop comes out 10-6-6 rainbow, and Eric checks it over to us, which is definitely standard if you're not going to 4-bet pre-flop. Now, I think there's an argument for both check and bet here, but I lean a little bit towards bet since I think when Eric just calls pre-flop, we're going to be ahead a lot of the time on this board, and we're not going to want to give a free card. Additionally, if we did have the top of our range with a big hand like jacks through aces, those are hands we would probably want to bet, so checking actually puts us in a pretty bad position to win the hand. Still, on a pretty static board, we shouldn't need to bet too large to get folds from unpaired hands like king-queen, queen-jack, etc., so we put in a bet of 150, just a bit over 1/3 pot. Unfortunately for us, Eric's overcards aren't just overcards, they also happen to match. He now steps on the gas and puts in the raise to 375. In my mind, there's still some chance he's putting us on exactly the type of hand we have and is trying to push us around, but we'll also have plenty of better hands in this spot, so we're going to wisely lay this one down.
Should be the end of the hand here for Zaction, and he lays it down. Good fold indeed.
Just after this hand, the San Antonio duo of Chaz and Rory show up, so we've got a full 8-handed game running. We don't see anything decent for about a half hour after this. We're stuck about 1,000 already, and we've yet to win a single pot, but in my mind, that just means we're due for a win, so we decide to add on another 2K, so we're in for 4K total and playing a more reasonable stack of over 100 straddles effective. This hand, we look down at pocket 7s in the cutoff, and we open it up for 3x to 75. Mark picks up ace-6 of hearts on the button, which is a hand I would look to 3-bet with some frequency, but he decides to just make the call, and the action folds over to Boston Timmy in the straddle with 4-deuce offsuit, which out of position is a clear fold, so he does make the call, and the flop is jack-jack-queen with 2 spades.
Jack-jack-queen. 7s for Zaction.
Timmy checks to us. Even though this is a dicey board, we're still likely to be ahead with our 7s a good percentage of the time. It's one of those situations where you just have to close your eyes, fire into the ether, and pray no one calls. We bet 150, which is a little large 3 ways, but the board is fairly wet, so I think it makes some sense. And thank God, Mark and Timmy let it go, so we get our first taste of victory, albeit a very small one. This next hand, Mark opens it up under the gun to $80 with ace-queen, which I obviously like. Timmy makes the call in the small blind with 5-4 of clubs, which I also like. Gage calls in the big blind with ace-10 offsuit. Everything's standard so far. Eric gets out of the way, and we look down at king-3 of clubs in the straddle, which is a bit loose, but closing the action, we are getting a very good price to see a flop, so we do defend. And the flop comes king-8-9, all spades. We flop a weak top pair on a board that's probably the worst board ever to flop top pair. The action checks over to us. I do think there's a decent argument for betting, but we also could be drawing dead 4 ways already, and there are a lot of hands that might look to check raise as well. So we check for some pot control, and Mark checks behind us, so we see a turn, which is the 9 of diamonds pairing the board. Timmy checks, and now Gage decides to bet his nut flush draw for 155, little under half pot. This is a super tough spot for us. In better position where we could potentially close the action, I would certainly advocate for a call, but with 2 players to act behind us and a hand that will basically never improve and may already be drawing dead versus a 9 or a flush, we decide to let it go, which is unfortunate when you see the equity percentages looking back, but I still think this is a play I would have to make again in the same spot. Really, I was just able to somehow tap into my sixth sense and know I never make the best hand because the river comes a spade anyway, making Gage's flush. No harm done. This next hand, we look down at 8-7 of clubs in the hijack. With a straddle and re-straddle, we're playing 5-5-10, 25-50, so we open it up to 150.
Zaction here, raising with the suited connectors from the hijack.
It folds over to Timmy in the third blind with ace-8 of spades, and he makes the call. Gage folds, and Eric elects to defend the double straddle with 7-4 of spades, so we go 3 ways to a flop of jack 5-10 rainbow. Both opponents check to us. We do have a gut shot straight draw, but it's not even to the nuts, so we decide to take a turn card, which is the 6 of hearts, giving us an additional straight draw.
6 of hearts here on the turn. Now an open-ender for Efan.
It checks to us again. It seems like nobody is interested in winning this pot, which makes it an appropriate time to step on the gas with a semi-bluff. We put out 225. Timmy gets out of the way, but Eric elects to make a call with a hand that, not seeing his cards, seems likely to be drawing, and seeing the cards is definitely drawing. The river comes the ace of clubs, so we both miss our draws, and while we actually have the best hand with 8 high, that isn't all that likely to be the case, so when Eric checks to us, we're looking to fire in a bluff to take it down. This is actually a pretty good card to bluff at because we can have a lot of hands with aces in them as the pre-flop raiser that we would want to bet here, like maybe ace-5, ace-6, or ace-10 suited, and even a hand like king-queen that made Broadway.
Ace on the river, often known as Barry Greenstein. Sure. Also known as a little bit of a bluff. Gets it through.
We bet 550, about 60% pot, which I think makes sense with a lot of those hands, and Eric makes the wise decision to let it go with just 7 high. Looking back, we were bluffing with the best hand, but in the moment, it definitely felt good to get one through. About 45 minutes go by, and we basically don't see a card higher than a 10. We are, however, able to order some coffee, which we hope will help keep us awake and also help weather the storm. Anyway, we're still playing a stack of about 3,000 at this point. There's no straddle in this hand, so Rory raises it up in the hijack with pocket 9s, and it folds all the way to us in the big blind with king-queen offsuit. I think generally this is a standard call, but with Mark in the third blind behind, I'd rather not let him in for a great price. Additionally, Rory has been playing what seems like every hand, which, looking back at the stream, makes a lot of sense because he's employing the very winning strategy of getting dealt aces every hand. Anyway, we don't know this at the time, so what we see is an aggressive player who's been opening frequently, and I'm also hoping that having folded every hand for the last hour will get us some credit, so we make the 3-bet to 100.
Zaction.
There you go.
He's back. He's been a little bit quiet recently, but he elects to 3-bet the king-queen off.
The action is now back on Rory, who elects to put in a 4-bet with his pocket 9s.
And Rory's going to 4-bet the 9s to 250.
Which, in my opinion, is a little bit of a weird play from him because while we're actually at the rock bottom of our 3-betting range, we still have 45% equity, and we're going to have big pairs like 10s plus pretty often here as well that have him crushed. Additionally, his raise is just another 150, which gives us better than 2-1 on a call, so I'm not really sure what he's doing here or if he thinks we're ever folding to a raise like this, but spoiler alert, we never are.
I like the 4-bet here from Rory, a snap call from Zaction.
We make the call and predictably whiff the flop, which comes jack 6 deuce rainbow. We're out of position and make the standard check over to Rory and Flo. Rory decides to check back, which is another move I likely wouldn't make in his shoes, but it does give us a free turn card.
Rory's not going to like to see that ace, nor is Zaction here.
the ace of clubs, which gives us a backdoor straight draw, but it's also not a great card for us because Rory certainly has a bunch of big aces in his pre-flop 4-betting range. For this reason, we check it over to him again, and luckily he checks back, so we see a river, which comes the deuce of diamonds, pairing the board, although it shouldn't be all that relevant considering the action pre-flop. However, I do think at this point, Rory's hand is pretty much capped at a hand exactly like the one he has, some kind of middling pair, because I really doubt he would have checked back the flop with a jack or the turn with an ace. We, on the other hand, could have easily been trapping the turn with a hand like ace-queen or even ace-deuce, so we can definitely still have a bunch of the strong hands that we would want to bet on the river. We decide to take a stab here for 350, which is going to put him in a tough spot with those hands.
This action's going to make the bet.
Rory's going to make the call here. The way this action went,
Probably going to pay this off,
yeah, he's going to make the call. He's going to see the good news.
most likely. How much is that, 350?
350.
I don't like the smell of it,
He's calling.
though. Donation.
Cool.
King eye. Ooh.
Rory takes it down.
Given our read was pretty much exactly correct, I would make this play again in this situation, but Rory ends up making a good call, so hats off to him for that. We do pick up one pot with ace-king in which we flop top pair and bet flop and turn, but nothing really to talk about there. So we're back up to 3K for this hand, which is one of the most interesting of the night for us, and really the only one where I'm pretty unhappy with my play. This one is straddled up to $50, and Timmy opens up the action to 145 on the button with ace-king offsuit, definitely standard, and it folds around to us in the third blind with jack 10 off. Out of position, I think this would be a fine spot to let it go, but we also do need to play some hands, and right now, these cards are looking pretty good to us, so we make the call. Mark looks down at ace-4 of clubs in the straddle in a spot where I think both calling and 3-betting are good, but he makes the call, and Joyce elects to defend with the queen-7 offsuit because money is just a construct. So we go 4 ways to a flop, which comes out 7-8-5 with 2 hearts.
8-7-5, couple hearts, pair of sevens for Joyce.
We're first to act and check, as do Mark and Joyce, and Timmy decides to fire out here for 225, which, seeing his hand, I don't love, but he does at least have 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw, so maybe it's okay.
225 from Boston Timmy.
And now the action is on us. We obviously don't have anything at the moment, but we do of course have a gutshot draw to the nuts and 2 overcards, so there are some turns we'll like on a board that should be pretty dicey for the overpair hands Timmy is representing. This is the second time in the hand where I maybe prefer a fold or a raise for this reason, but we do make the call. Mark thinks for a little while, but decides he's priced in with an overcard, a dummy straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw, which I'm not sure I agree with, but he makes the call. And Joyce wisely gets out of the way with what's ironically the best hand at the moment, but is going to be impossible to play on later streets, so we're off to a turn in a big pot already.
His action connects with the 10.
The turn is the 10 of clubs, which gives us top pair on a board that's too wet for even Aquaman. We could have the best hand, but leading out into 2 players in this spot feels a lot like suicide, so we check again.
Mark picks up a flush draw to go along with his straight draw, so he is a little bit more interested as well. Let's see what he wants to do. Does he want to lead here on the turn, asking to see Timmy's stack?
1825.
And Mark decides to do something which seems a little odd given the action. He throws out a piece of pineapple, a yellow 1K chip, into this pot of about 1200. If Timmy had an overpair, it would put him in a tough spot, but he has just ace-king, so he throws it away, and the action is back on us. We're playing a remaining stack of about 2400 at this point. I'm not sure calling and folding river is much of an option, so basically we need to decide now if this is the hand to go with or not right here on the turn. I do think usually this is a board where top pair really isn't all that great, but the more I mull over this hand during sleepless nights, I actually don't mind jamming here because it's really hard to find a made hand that Mark can have in this spot. Breaking it down, when Mark calls the flop, it should mean he'll never have a made straight with 6-9 or a set of 5s, 7s, or 8s because those are definitely hands that should be looking to check raise flop close to 100% of the time and deny equity from straight and flush draws. Pocket 10s make sense as a hand he might play this way, but we have a 10 in our hands, so there's only one combination of those left in the deck, which makes that pretty unlikely. And while he could have made the nuts with Jack 9 on the turn, we also block one of the jacks, so really unless he has exactly one of those hands, it's hard to find a value hand he would play this way.
There's action here with the best hand currently, top pair. It doesn't really look like a believer, Rick.
On the other hand, the last thing we want to do on our first ever live stream is re-raise jam our last 2.5K like a donkey, get shown Jack 9, and be drawing stone dead.
Might be laying down the best hand.
All right.
It's going into the muck. Bye-bye. Night-night. Top pair. Early to bed, top pair. In the muck.
You know Jack 4 isn't that good of a holding.
I'm a semi-bluff. I go inside.
Oh, man, I'm such a nit. Can't believe I both folded the big lick.
So we do end up folding. Mark shows the semi-bluff in real time, which it's worth noting still had 34% equity, but we're definitely a little steamed up after this one. This next hand is a rare unstraddled pot.
Ace 4 for Gage. He raises it to 35.
Gage opens it up under the gun +1 with ace 4 offsuit, which in his shoes I think is a little too loose. We look down at 5-4 of hearts in the cutoff, and though we've obviously can't see the cards, we have noticed that Gage seems to be opening a little bit light, so we put in the 3-bet in position to 90.
It's action with 4-5 suited. Gonna re-raise it, making it 90.
It folds back to Gage, who makes the call, and we go to a flop heads up, which gives both of us a piece. It comes ace 3-8 with 2 clubs and a heart.
Wheel draw. Aces for Gage. Wheel draw for Zaction.
So we've got a gut shot to the wheel and a backdoor flush draw. Gage checks it to us as is standard. I think the flop ace is generally going to favor our pre-flop 3-betting range, and there are a lot of hands that simply will have missed and can't call anything, so we decide to bet small for 75. Gage, however, doesn't have one of those hands. He's got top pair, so he makes the call, and we go to a turn which is very favorable for Gage.
2 pair now for Gage, and a pair for Zaction.
It's the 4 of diamonds, giving us both a pair. The only problem is he has one more of those than we do. Gage checks again, setting the trap. In our shoes, I don't really see any reason to bet here, as Gage's range is pretty much only hands that are ahead of us that he's unlikely to fold on this turn, or draws that we're likely ahead of with our 4. So we slow down and check, and take a river, which hopefully won't be the only card in the deck that's going to lose us more money, but oof.
As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos, it will be a home run.
Now that was an action river card. Both players think
Gage.
they're good, but it's a boat for the 1 seat.
Yeah, this is going to be ugly.
Yeah, it's the case 4 giving us trips, which should pretty much always be good in this spot. Meanwhile, Gage makes a full house and he checks it over to us.
And he checks the boat.
I will say I'm not really a big fan of this play from him because after the turn goes check, I think there's a ton of hands we can have that would have to call a bet, but would also look to check back, like say an 8 or really any pocket pair. So he's going to be missing a ton of value from those hands. And while we're definitely going to be betting a decent ace in this spot as played, he blocks that hand and we probably wouldn't be checking an ace on the turn either. So when he checks the river, really the only hands we'll bet are bluffs and, oh yeah, exactly the hand we have. So forget all that. It's a great play. We're betting. We decide to go about 2/3 pot, which I still like, looking to get value from a naked ace or really any of those middling pair type hands that I just mentioned. And now we're going to get the bad news.
Nice little check there from the 1 seat, going for a quick check raise.
The check raise from Gage to 650. I think Skull Mike tells the story well here.
And Zaction now smiling. He's not going to lay it down, though. Only 650. He doesn't like it, but he's going to pay it off.
Long story short, we can't fold because Gage's range probably shouldn't have ace 4 in the first place, and because he can have a bunch of missed flush draws, which we don't block, and oh yeah, because we have 3 of a kind.
Brutal river for the 3 seat.
Oh, that's...
It's been rather cold over there on that side of the table for the 1, 2, and the 3.
We brick a few more flops and actually get it all in with Joyce in a pot that ends up being a chop before this final hand, which I'm showing more because it wraps up the story and less because it's a particularly interesting hand. We look down at the ace-jack suited in the hijack with the $50 straddle on and open it up to 150, playing a stack of just under 1,000 behind. Joyce is on the button with 4-3 offsuit, and she must have misread her hand because she makes the call.
Aces now for Chaz. He's had kings 3 times today. Aces for the 2nd time. And this could be the end of Zaction, as he has ace-jack suited, the best hand he's seen in a while.
And then Big Daddy Chaz looks down at pocket aces in the small blind and 3-bets to 800, which is a bit large, but with the smooth call in front of him, I think it makes some sense. Everyone else gets out of the way, and the action is on us. As Skull Mike in the booth mentions, Chaz has picked up aces and kings 5 times in this session so far, and we haven't seen all of those, so we don't know that he's playing the wait for aces strategy, which, by the way, is one that I highly recommend. Anyway, given we have a short stack of just about 22 blinds and Joyce's call looks particularly weak, I think Chaz can be squeezing light here a good portion of the time. And then outside of rational strategy, I think there's also literal steam coming out of our ears at this point, so we rip it in. Joyce gets out of the way, and now we're all into a run out.
I have aces.
Yeah.
Again.
I almost 4-bet too.
Where do you go? 10 to
Not beat it in that.
I almost 4-bet.
I know, I saw you, dude. That was really fun.
Doesn't matter. I also almost just cold call. I had such a good hand.
Jackson hot.
If it's any consolation, the flop has the case ace, so it's nice to know we would have gone broke on this hand anyway, even if Chaz hadn't 3-bet. The turn gives us some outs with a flush draw.
Little sweat. Here we go.
Bates!
Lifeline for the 3 seat.
USC Trojans!
Of course, that isn't going to hit.
Alrighty then.
With a little more than an hour left on the stream, we could rebuy, but before the game, I basically decided 2 bullets was the max I was willing to fire into the abyss if things went south, so we're going to stick to that. Also, I generally am pretty good about not going turbo tilt mode, but I've also been playing in this game for about 4 hours and failed to win a single hand at Showdown, so I'd be lying if I said I wasn't showing a few cracks and maybe not in a position to play my best poker. Overall, not much to sugarcoat here, guys. It was a pretty tough session for us. We came in with $4,000 in cash and left with nothing but a free cup of Starbucks cold brew. Thanks for that, Chaz. For a total loss of $3,995, my biggest single session loss to date.